Welcome to the Stir It Up podcast, where our purpose is to encourage, challenge, lift up, and stir up the body of Christ to love and good works. Hello, and welcome to the Stir It Up podcast. I'm Michelle Dowdy.
And I'm Starla Harbin.
And we are still from the Rivercrest Studios and the Farmhouse Studios. So, worked out pretty well last week, I would say.
Yes. All good.
All good. So again, not to beat a dead horse, but want to remind you about the giveaway. We have a great basket full of goodies that we're going to give away at the end of this Why Submit study. So be sure and just, you can drop us a line too and just tell us something you like about the podcast, somebody you'd like to have on or whatever, but just put giveaway in the subject of the email, and you can email us at stirredup1024@gmail.com. So be sure and do that. And be sure too, and give us that 5-star review, or go on and like, subscribe, whatever platform you're listening on. It really does help the algorithm and help drive people to the podcast. So if it's meant something to you, if it encourages you and you think it would encourage other people, then do that for us. Just take a minute. That would be so much appreciated. But we want to continue on in our study. So we want to go to that next chapter. That's chapter 6. And it's titled, Who's the Boss? Now, do you remember that TV show?
I do. With what was his name?
Tony Danza.
Yeah, Tony Danza.
Right? I don't remember the women that were in that, but
blonde lady. It was a blonde lady, and she had
Alyssa Milano. Yes,
there you go.
Not Melissa.
She was the little girl. Yeah.
Yeah, she was the little girl. Yeah, that's right. She's all grown up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so who's the boss? So here again, we kind of get, we're following along with that theme of kind of submission, of humbling ourselves and looking at those areas in our lives that we come under someone else's authority or submission, and those attitudes, or those areas where we should have a general attitude of submission to someone who's in authority over us. So so we're going to talk about those, the first one being in the body of Christ. We're underneath the leadership, are those in authority in the local fellowship, and we come under their leadership and their authority for our good. There's a scripture that we quoted in the book. You want to go ahead and read?
Yes, in Hebrews 13:17, it says, "Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls, as those who will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you."
Right. So here again, not following blindly, obviously, like we've said before. There's obviously, when you have a person in a place of authority or power, there is always that room for, or possibility of abuse. But if somebody is following the Lord faithfully, and you have confidence in that leadership in the church, then we are underneath that leadership. And it says, what was that? No, let them do this with joy and not with groaning. Well, you don't want to be somebody who your pastor dreads seeing coming down the hall or something, because you're going to lambaste them with something. You want to bring them joy. Because, you think about even like a small body part, even a tooth or a little toe or something. If you have pain in one part of your body, then it affects your whole body. It's like, that's all you can think about, is that sore tooth or that little toe that you can't really walk. Well, sometimes that can be like what we're like in the lives of leadership, is just, okay, that one that just needles in there, and you can cause them pain, and not good. So they're there to shepherd you as Christ's representative. And so we need to have that attitude of submission.
And I think anybody that's in that role as a shepherd, you know, um, there is great accountability that comes with that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an awe of God in that position. Now, like you said, it can certainly turn to the awe of man, and we've seen that happen. But there is a almost a reverence for that because it says for that would be of no advantage to you. So if you're led by somebody who's not walking with the Lord or doesn't hold that standard of what God's called them to do in a high regard as unto the Lord, it's of no advantage
Right.
to the
Yeah.
followers. So
Yeah, and it just strikes me how, it does seem like lately we have seen so many in very public leadership fall, and it is always distressing, but we have to think about for every one that we see, there are how many other tens of thousands, I don't know how many ministers there are of various denominations in
right,
in the country, but let's just say, so and so over here fell today, but we don't see the headline, you know, 995,000 ministers faithfully serve the Lord today. So like there are so many that are just year by year, day by day, month by month, who are being faithful, who take their calling seriously and would never abuse that
right.
calling. So, I mean, it's too bad that we do. I mean, we see everything, and I think somebody, the more public their platform, the larger their platform, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. I mean, it is that you're going to see that, and probably the potential for abuse, the more well known somebody gets, and probably, you
Mm.
know, maybe isolated from accountability to a certain extent, maybe, I don't know. But
Yeah, as my mama would say, they get too big for their britches.
yeah, right. Or too big for their raisin. My mom used to say that
Big
too.
for their britches.
Right, right. So don't, there again though, going back to don't be a bad tooth or in the life of your pastor or the leadership in your church, unless there's something sinful going on, trust their leadership because they're in that position. They're in the position that the Lord has
Mm.
placed them in. And so, I think we need to have that attitude of submission within ourselves, like recognizing that we're under
Well,
the authority
I
of the
think
Lord.
I think through technology and texting and all that we have now, um, it is so encouraging to get a card or a note
Hmm.
from somebody. And so if you have a pastor, an associate pastor, a pastor's wife, a women's ministry leader, a preschool director,
Hmm.
that you could just write a note to, because there was a card that was left on my desk Sunday, and it was from one of our ladies in the church, and it was kind of like a Valentine card, but it was just basically saying how much what I do means to her, and
Yeah.
how important I am to her.
Oh.
And that file, within all my files, that file's not very thick of people sending me. Now people text me, I do get encouragement, I'm not saying that, but sometimes those real acts of sitting down and doing something like that, but for a pastor to hear, you know, you're leading us well, or thank you for the time you put into your sermons, or you handled a hard situation really well, or I'm praying for you.
Right, right.
As I mean, pastors are just flesh and bone like everybody else. You know,
Yes.
they have a sin nature. We have to put on everything that every other believer, and a lot of unsung heroes to me in ministry are those bivocational pastors
Mm-hmm.
who are working 60 hours a week, and they're trying to prepare a Wednesday night message, a Sunday night or a Sunday morning message. They're trying to visit hospital, and what a blessing they are. And they are more than likely the ones that are, doing it year after year after year in these smaller churches.
Right.
they're some of the ones you don't hear about. Those you hear about the big names, but you don't hear about those. And so, that's just some things that um really encourage your leadership, and you can do that. And we have a great fellowship. I mean, we get gift cards, we get, text, and
Yeah.
they're so kind to us.
Yeah, but it really does give you a boost, I'm sure. I mean, I know even with what I do, like I have some families that I work with that they'll
Mhm.
just like every holiday that comes, whether it's Valentine's Day or Christmas or just like the little things, they're giving you a card or they're giving you a little gift or whatever. And just, that card will usually say how much they appreciate you or whatever. And that does mean a lot because, everybody wants to know that they are doing something valuable, that means something to the ones that they're trying to serve. And I think, you know, especially in this position, but they have watch care over you in the Lord. Like how many times do you, I mean, you let us all, because we're in the same fellowship together, so you let everybody know if there's a need, like if someone is sick, and immediately we arrange, the food and if that's appropriate, or just, like what does a person need? How can we help? Like all of those things, yes, you're kind of under that, and thinking about that umbrella that you're sheltered under that umbrella, like how good it is to be able to know that, okay, like if something happens, these people will be at my door to help me, so that's part of that. Okay, in our submission, it has benefit for us because we're under that covering, so to speak. So, um, well, anything else about that? You probably could preach a couple of
I could go
sermons
on and
about
on, but
that.
we must get to Caesar.
Yeah, yes,
Gonna
Caesar.
render to
Good old
Caesar.
Caesar. So I titled this little subsection "Render to Caesar." So, the Bible also makes it clear we are to submit to governmental authorities, that the Lord has placed governments in place. Governments were His idea, along with marriage and the church. It's one of those institutions. So borders and countries and governments, I mean, God's idea, just and there again, He's a God of order, and this is a way of helping people to flourish and to be safe. So, so many of His precepts and guardrails are around for our protection, for our good, for our flourishing, and actually for our freedom, so that we can have a certain amount of freedom within, um, you know and not violate other people's freedom. So, um, you've heard that phrase though. We're from the government, and we're here to help. That I think Ronald Reagan always used to say that, and just sometimes that phrase kind of strikes dread in us, or like we tend to have a big distrust of the government, and we do look at it and we see a lot of waste, especially I guess on that federal, on the larger level. um but we're called to have that attitude of submission, even there. So there are a couple of different scriptures, Romans 13:1 and 2, and then First Peter 2, that talk about how the authority has been placed by God. You want to read those, a couple of those?
Romans 13:1 and 2 says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment." And then it goes on in First Peter 2:13 and 14. He gives the similar instructions, but be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor or supreme or to governors, as sent by him to punish those who do evil and praise those who do good.
Yeah, and then even, in Titus 3:1, it says, remind them to be submissive to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, and to be ready for every good work. And, then I also think about when Jesus was in front of Pilate, and Pilate said, "Don't you know that I have the authority to crucify you or to release you?" And then Jesus said, "You'd have no authority unless it had been given to you by God." So, another recognition, even by Jesus himself, that you know, the structures that are in place have been set in place by God. Now, sometimes that is a mercy for people if the rulers are good. Sometimes it can be, if rulers are wicked, it's a sort of a punishment for people. Uh, the Bible says so. Um, so we always pray that we have good leaders. That our leaders are not wicked. But think about that the role of government to praise those who do good and to punish those who do evil. I mean, that's the basic crux of it. So, have you ever been to the Capitol? Like I've been to the Capitol several times, just with OT things a couple of times. But when you go, there's always like it's such and such a day, or they've declared this or that or whatever. And so they're praising those who do good. When somebody gets the Congressional Medal of Honor or whatever, they're praising. They want more of that kind of behavior. They want more of whatever they're praising. And then on the flip side, they're there to administer justice. That those who've done evil, who've transgressed against somebody else, they have to pay, you know, they have to be made to pay their debt to society, and then, then they can be free. But we're called to submit to the leaders and to pray for them. I mean, I think, and there have been times when, of course, when you have less confidence in your leaders or you think they're wicked, you should pray for them all the more. It's almost like you should pray for them more almost than you pray for the ones that you feel like are more aligned with biblical values. Um, so
Yeah. And don't you think too, some of the role of government is really the church's role?
yes, yes. So I think you know, th- I mean, really taking care of the poor, that is the church's job. Now, there again, just like I think it was last week, we talked about that you know, Christianity is so baked in these concepts of every life having infinite worth. Like every life has worth. Whereas, in the old Roman times, the babies used to be put outside the city, and it was Christians who would go and rescue the babies and this kind of thing. But um, yes, so I think, you know, that has gotten so baked in that idea of every person having value, and that we need to have some kind of safety net for the poor, the disabled, whatever the case may be there. But I think, and there's, there can be debate about that. Yes. I mean, I think, yes, we should have some kind of, baseline safety net. But I mean, I think it is the church's responsibility. If families were to take care of their own
Mhm.
people like they used to, and churches were to do the same thing, then we wouldn't have those needs that may have to be met. But I think people have so isolated themselves. They're over here and maybe the family is over here. And, well, that's the government's job, is like let the government pay for that or whatever. But, yeah, so I don't know what the solution to that is. I'm not a politician, but I mean, we should look for opportunities, just like your word for the year, opportunities to do the job of the church, to
Yes.
not let the government come in and take our job, because the more we do and the more we meet needs, the less the government will have to meet the needs.
Yes. Yeah. When we give that cup of cold water in his name, and be the hands and feet of Jesus, then we definitely can participate in that outside
Yeah.
of what expectations are from the government.
Yeah, I think this is one of the hardest things, one of the hardest areas to think about submitting to governmental authorities because we do see a lot of waste, and or corruption or whatever, and we think, oh boy, but there again, to pray for our leaders, to submit ourselves and to try to, at the level that we can, what's right there in front of us, participate. I mean, vote, run for school board, get on the school board, get on the whatever, and be part of that solution, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, bring that spiritual influence.
Yeah. Um, then so anything else on that?
No, we're good.
Yeah. Okay. So the last one in that section is the subtitle, You Are the Boss of Me. So how many times have you heard that phrase? Somebody say, You aren't the boss of me.
Yeah.
Lots of times, yeah. But everybody loves to hate the boss. Have you noticed that? And it doesn't matter. Like I've been in work situations where it doesn't matter how good, kind, benevolent, it doesn't matter what anybody does. There are some people that are always going to complain.
Yes.
So it's just,
Even in the church. Yes.
yeah, even in the church, that's for sure. But yeah, some people are just always, they're going to find fault with the way that something is done. Because I think it's just sort of in our nature to want to do things our own way. We don't want people don't like to be told what to do. And if there's somebody in authority, if there's a boss, they're, you know, they're setting out guidelines or they're doing things that you have to follow. Well, there'll always be somebody who thinks something's unfair or they don't like it or whatever. So I've seen this on both sides. Not that I don't know have any knowledge of anybody saying that I was, I did this. I'm just saying I've been the one like over people and
Yeah.
that you just know maybe when somebody is not liking a particular policy or something.
As a leader, I mean, you can move mountains for people, and sometimes it is just still, I mean, you can just think and have their best interests at heart, and not necessarily at North Star for me, but in other places. And then it just like comes back to bite you, and you're just like, I couldn't have done any more, you know?
Right.
Um, so
Right. Yeah. So, but so the scripture does give us instructions. Now, these instructions use the terms, bond servant and master. And, before we read this scripture, just let me say a word about that. So, of course, we know this was in a different day and time with a different economic system. Now, this master and slave was not like, don't think about the chattel slavery of the antebellum South in America. This was a different type. Like people could actually sell themselves into slavery. If they were in debt, they could go and work for somebody and then, work their way out of that. So, I think about even Joseph,
mhm.
who was sold into slavery by his brothers, but then he ended up becoming the ruler over Potiphar's household, and all of this was sort of under his command. Well, that's not like slavery in America. I mean, it's like you could work your way up, even though, yes, you were obligated, you were uh, I suppose their property, which is not, we don't think that should be, but it was the economic system sort of the day. So when he uses the term bond servant and master, then that's, think more along those lines. So I would think more along the employer employee in today's times because, even as employees, we're selling our time, we're committed to that employer, whatever it is. So, I mean, they don't own us, but we're committed to them. So it's, we can take these principles and apply to that. But so Ephesians 6:5-8. Do you want to read that one for us?
Yes. So Paul says, addressing these types of relationship, bond servants, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would Christ, not by the way of eye service as people pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with a good will as to the Lord and not to man, knowing that whatever good anyone does, this he will receive back from the Lord, whether he is a bondservant or is free. Then he goes on in verse 9 to talk about the master's responsibility to the bondservant. Masters, do the same to them and stop your threatening, knowing that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and that there is no partiality with him.
Hmm. Yeah, and that just strikes me, bond servants, obey your earthly masters with a sincere heart as you would Christ.
Mm.
So work for them as you would for the Lord. And see your work in that way. And then it says masters do the same. In other words, that in that like in Ephesians 5:21, that mutual submission, submit yourselves to one another out of reverence for Christ. That's basically what he's saying here. Bond servants, obey your masters, and the masters do likewise do all these things as well to the employee. So anyway, that's how we should see each other as employees and employers, and those who have authority over maybe a group of people. Even somebody who is in business for themselves, like myself, even though, okay, I own the business, but it's like your patients are your boss.
Yeah.
Everybody has a boss.
Yes.
So, you know, and so you should try to think of things that way. Like, okay, who am I? Whose authority am I under here? Who am I trying to please? And as I try to please them, I should look at them as unto the Lord, that I'm working for them as unto the Lord. So, um,
Yeah, that's good. Good reminders.
right. So with just kindness, respect in both directions there, that mutual submission, even though, yes, an employer has a certain amount of authority over you that you should be submitting to as, as as to the Lord. Now, there again, if they're doing something illegal or immoral, you're not called to participate in that, of course. But sometimes we do have to endure some things in the workplace. And I think, how do we respond to those things? Are we filled with pride like we were talking about last week? Is pride holding you back? Is there something that because of pride, your attitude is not quite where it should be? Do you have a humble attitude of a servant when someone asks you to do something? Maybe even that's out of your area or whatever. Well, can I do that willingly? Um, can I can I be a servant in that situation, or am I too puffed up in my position and I'm not going to do that, kind of
Yeah.
thing. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We recently at the church have started another small group. And it was for a small group for women, single, widowed, divorced, even married. And, finding a teacher, it was sort of where we landed, was with two ladies who have really not been in that role,
mhm,
but they are willing,
right.
and we believe in them that the Lord has given them and will give them what they need, and it will grow them
Mhm,
in that role
right.
of leadership. But it's been a really sweet, we've had 2 weeks of it, and one taught one week and another taught the other week. And it has just been so sweet to see how somebody can sort of rise to that with a willing heart,
Yeah.
through our leadership of saying, yes, we think, God has put this in you and we want to see this come out of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And how wonderful to push somebody. I've always said about you, if you know Starla long enough, she will nudge you out of your comfort zone, or sometimes she might push you out, not just nudge you.
You can sing
But,
that.
but anyway, right. But, you know, I think, like we might not even be doing this if you had not nudged me out in various ways, because I was always more, and still probably am a lot more comfortable. I mean, we're behind this. This is safe. We can edit all
Right.
this, like I'm not standing up in public, but there have been things we've done, even speaking in the service or doing various things that I never would have done before I met you. So, so leadership, that's a good leader, helps others discover their gifts. So, you're pushing pushing them out to to fulfill. I mean, that's what the leaders are supposed to be doing, is to equipping the saints to fulfill their ministry. So so that's a great example right there of you doing that, but um of that going on. But you kind of touched on this, our questions. Did
Yes.
you look at those?
Yes.
um
Yes, I did. I did. In the question section, the first question says, what is something specific you could do this week to honor those who are leaders in your church fellowship? And of course, for what we kind of, referred to earlier, was
yeah.
pray for them,
Hmm.
encourage other people to do the same.
Hmm.
Those within the fellowship, spur them on to be those encouragers. A note, a text, even just a verbal, you know thank you
Hmm.
for
Right.
what you said today, or that song, or how you ministered to our family. It really
Right.
meant so much to us. And then I think one other thing is having people that serve faithfully.
Yes. Yeah.
Such a
So
blessing,
important. Yeah.
to leadership, because that is being supportive.
Yes.
If everybody just said, well, I'll serve once every 6 months, or, we walk in on Sunday and I know there's going to be people in their place
Yeah.
and I don't have to think about it.
Right.
I know that the heat or the air, whatever needs to be turned on, is going to be on. I know that there's people to teach preschool, and there's people to love on children, and there's going to be somebody to run the lyrics, and all of those components, if those people didn't serve faithfully, would be a hardship to us.
Right.
And
Right.
so resting in people, that are saying, yes, I'll do this. And then that's one of the things I love about you and Mark. I mean, we had that same heart, but even our whole worship team is, I don't really worry about y'all knowing the music or being there when you're supposed to be there. And yes, some things take us out at times,
Yeah.
but you're still going to come prepared.
Right. Right.
And we're not having to do a whole working reading session or whatever just to get everybody on the same
Right.
page right before church
Yeah.
starts.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this before, how we all came from that generation of like, unless you were dying, you were sick,
Reading out.
just like, yeah, unless you were like in the bed and could not move, you would go. Probably made other people sick doing that, but anyway, it's like, you just went. I mean, you didn't think about not being there when somebody was counting on you. And that is one thing I put too, is offer to volunteer with some regular task, like maybe even not, something that maybe you do every week, that just for that week. Oh, let me take that for you this week. Let me help you this week, or something like that. Um,
Yes, yes, I love it. And it really encourages your leadership when you do things like that. If you work outside the home, what is one thing you could do on your next work day to demonstrate your support for your boss? Or if you are the boss, what is one thing you could do to demonstrate appreciation for those under your leadership? And just like you said, I wrote down offer to help with a specific task.
yeah. And just those there again, I think a note or a word of encouragement that can mean so much. And not some false thing, but just like, we can all find something encouraging or nice to say.
Yeah,
And it does help people, because you do remember times when people wrote you notes and things, and expressed their thanks, or something like
right.
that. And then even for, like I try to do that with the therapists that work with me, like, I appreciate you. Thanks for your hard work this week. Or if that, if it was a hard week, or, they saw a whole lot of people, it was a busy week. Thank you so much for what you're doing, or whatever. So I think just sometimes just that acknowledgement, and not just going along and just never mentioning anything, everybody doing the status quo, but just being thankful. So,
And I try to do some kind of little treat here or there.
yeah.
Uh, we have a lot of girls in our on our team, and we like things.
Yeah.
The guys love food or candy.
Yeah.
So, just a little Easter something treat,
Yeah.
or, October sort of appreciation month, putting together a goodie bag with a gift card, if it's feasible to do it. I try to do some of those things along the way too.
Yes.
Not that we all have coffee mugs and we all, have things like that, but it's more of just that thought that, as their leader, I went out of my way to make
Yeah.
sure that I did something tangible.
Yeah.
And it's not a
Yeah.
lot. It doesn't cost a lot. And I'm sure there's other things I could do that I don't do, but
Yeah.
I try to make that extra effort sometimes. This because especially at Easter, Christmas, y'all are there more. You're learning more songs. You're investing more time even outside of the church, the
Yeah.
walls of the church. So
And especially if it is, like a church situation or other situation where you're dealing with volunteers. I've been in those situations,
yes,
even not even in a church, but just, you have volunteers. That is important to let them know that they're appreciated and communicate with them and all of that. So, yeah.
yes,
So all
that's right.
good. All
Yeah.
good. Um, and then this last one is not a question, but just encouraging everybody just to take a moment to pray for those who come to mind in the government, whether you agree with them or not. So, and I have a prayer list. I don't always pray every day over my exact prayer list. I might do other, pray about other things or whatever, but I have the people in government on my list, and so maybe just, if you haven't added that to your list, and just, even if you don't agree with much of anything of what somebody is about, pray for them and pray for the Lord's wisdom for them and for them to follow him ultimately. So, um, anyway, so those are the things that we had for today. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So good.
and then next week we will do chapter 7, a gentle and quiet spirit. So, but we have you stirred
Recipe.
up for us today in the kitchen.
Yes.
We know
Yeah.
y'all love these recipes, and we're going to start, I think, probably in about 2 weeks. May not be every week, but we're going to show you how we make the recipe. So we know a lot of y'all like to watch the recipe being made. So we're going
Yeah.
to try to do that more.
Yes. A little bit of home ec. No.
Yeah, that's right.
The stirred up cooking class.
Yeah.
So a few nights ago, I made something called steak Diane with mushroom cream sauce.
Yeah.
So as far as your meat, though, you could use chicken breast
Okay.
or bone-in chicken breast. You could use a pork chop.
Yeah.
So, it's just basically a
Whatever meat.
sauce, yeah, that's going to go over your
Okay.
meat to just sort of,
Yeah.
enhance it. So we did have sirloins, and so you have two steaks because Pawpaw can't eat steak, so we grilled him chicken. So we had two steaks, and all this can be done in a skillet, or you
Okay.
can grill your steaks
Yeah.
and just put it inside the sauce.
Yeah.
So we had two steaks, two sirloins. The ingredients are a cup of mushrooms sliced, 2 tablespoons of butter, a half a cup of heavy cream, 1 table of Dijon mustard, 1 tablespoon, both of those are 1 tablespoon Worcestershire sauce, 2 cloves of garlic minced, and salt and pepper to taste. So you're going to season your steaks with the salt and pepper on both sides and then set them aside. In your skillet, you're going to melt that butter over medium heat and let it get, warm, good and warm. You're going to add the steaks and cook to your desired doneness. And then you're going to remove and set aside. So we're more like medium,
Yeah.
like our
Okay.
steak
Yeah.
medium. And then, so you're going to take the steaks out, set them aside in the same skillet. Then you add in those mushrooms and garlic and saute the mushrooms until they're tender.
You said fresh mushrooms, right?
Yes, fresh
Yeah.
mushrooms.
Okay.
Then you're going to stir in that heavy cream, your Dijon mustard, and your Worcestershire sauce, and cook until it thickens up.
Okay.
And then, kind of once all that gets together, and you're going to add your steaks back into the skillet and just coat them with the sauce.
Yeah.
And then you just serve them. And I did it with mashed potatoes and kind of plated it over the mashed potatoes. and serve hot with additional sauce drizzled over the top.
Mm.
The recipe is really the sauce because like I said, you could
You could
do.
do anything. Yeah. So I think Cheesecake Factory has a steak
Yes,
Diane, don't they? Yeah.
yes. And Russ loves that. And so he actually found this recipe and he was like, because he always gets that at
Yeah.
Cheesecake.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Because there used to be, was it the hibachi steak or something like that? Yeah, that's what it was called, but they don't have that anymore. And so the steak Diane is kind of
Took the
their
place.
replacement. And so, yeah, Mark gets that too. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
fingers
So
full.
he's always loved that. So it's just a really good creamy sauce with those
Yeah.
mushrooms that you can, put over some type of meat.
Yeah. So, well, we may not want to get into this, but I I tried something the other day, which
Okay.
uh so I get this subscription from Good Ranchers,
Huh?
which is like and it's these little bitty steaks. Well,
Okay.
and that's fine for, for us. Like, well, I might even just do it on the stovetop, even in a skillet, if we don't grill or whatever. But I was wondering how those little steaks would taste in a crock pot and if it would taste kind of like a roast.
Okay.
Well, so I look it up, can you cook steaks, boneless steaks in the crock pot? What does it taste like and all that? So AI told me or Google whatever that you could do that it was really good. You could
Yeah.
shred it and do it like a pot roast. And sure enough, I did this au jus, just a packet of gravy, and I put like five of those little things in there, and it was like steak tips or like more like shredded, and it was so good and tender and flavorful that it was really better than a steak.
Yeah.
I mean than a roast. It was
Oh,
really more tender, like like that steak meat. So I never would have thought to do that, but I just thought, it seems like those like a roast is getting so expensive now.
expensive.
It's like 25 or $30 for a big roast. And I thought, I wonder if I could put some of those little steaks in there because we sometimes we can't eat all that before it even goes bad. And so like if I'm, have some people over and I thought, I wonder how that would work, to do that, what that would taste like.
Well, I did that too last week because I didn't have a roast, but I had like stew meat.
Yeah.
Thought, well, I'll make the stew meat just like I make my roast. And I put carrots and potatoes
Yeah.
in there just like I do my roast. But
Yeah.
it really turned out to be more. I probably cooked it too long in the crock
Yeah.
pot, like 4 hours would have been enough. Because I mean, it just disintegrated. So it was more like
Yeah.
beef stew, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it being more like a roast with vegetables.
Yeah. Like you
It's
can
still
slice.
good. I mean, it was
Yeah.
still the flavor and
Yeah.
everything, but if I would have just left it at 4 hours, it would have probably
Yeah.
been fine. But 6 hours, it just was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
almost more like
Now,
soupy.
those people who like rare or whatever, they
Yeah,
would,
can't do
it's
that.
still it's like a roast, but by the time it gets to that point. So I was really surprised. I thought, man, I've discovered something. So
Yeah, well, that sounds delicious.
that's good. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. And again, hope you're enjoying this study, and we will see you next week on the Stir It Up podcast.
Thank you for joining us today. May the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.